Welcome to the next episode of Change the Game, Not Africa podcast. My name is Dávid Köleséri. I am currently a student at the University of Szeged studying Business Administration and Management. In this episode, I have the honor to have a conversation with Timothy Yaw Acheampong, a Ghanaian Research Associate at the University of Szeged. Timothy has a master's degree in development economics and great expertise in aiding. As we delve into his experiences, we'll uncover the challenges he faced in adapting to a new culture, the insights he gained from working within the NGO sector, and his vision for the future of aid and development in Africa. Good morning, Yao.
Yes, good morning.
Welcome to the interview.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
First, I would like to ask a few questions about your personal background. So what prompted your move to Hungary? What did you give up moving here?
Well, actually, I just found out about the Stipendium Hungarian Scholarship. It was advertised in Ghana's national newspaper. It's called the Daily Graphic. And I just decided to apply for the scholarship for the PhD program in economics here at our faculty. And I was lucky to be admitted here, and that is how I ended up here in Hungary in 2018.
How long ago was that?
2018.
2018,
Yeah.
okay. Can you share any experiences when you've encountered any cultural differences, and how did you navigate these differences?
Well, I think some of the cultural differences that I see are mainly in areas of language. Of course, here Hungarian is the official language, and then in Ghana the official language is English. However, we have several local dialects in Ghana, so the language is one of the differences, and then also food. We have different type of food dishes which I could not find here in Hungary. I still haven't found in Hungary. And then aside from that, I think the way people relate to other people is somehow different, because in Ghana we have a more of a communal type of relationship with people. So for example, if people take the bus together, one person always pays for the others. If we go out for to a place to eat, one person usually pays for the others. But here mostly everyone has to fund their own food or activities or whatever. So those kind of things are different. And also in Ghana, mostly we like to greet people. I think Hungarians, we also do that also. I realize that is also done here, but yeah, we like to do a lot of those type of things. The other difference is that, especially in the academic setting, is that Ghana, we have a more formal type of system. So for example, it's not really common for the students to be able to freely interact with their lecturers as much, depending on where you are. But I think here it seems like, at least for some of the lecturers, it's pretty open and you can easily interact with them. So I think those are some of the differences. In terms of how I managed to navigate those, actually, it wasn't my first time living with people from different backgrounds. I grew up in the US and Canada, and then also even in Ghana, we have people with different backgrounds. So it's a normal part of life to just interact with people from different backgrounds, yeah. And of course, to a large extent, there's an international community. Most of the lecturers also speak English and quite friendly, so it wasn't so difficult. And when you go to the shops and you're in the streets, people speak, enough English for us to be able to interact. So it was kind of smooth to navigate, actually.
Right. These are some very interesting differences that an average person wouldn't really think about. Have you experienced any kind of negative discrimination due to these differences, or any other factors like skin color?
If I did, I didn't notice it because for me, I think, especially growing up in the US, which is a country where there was a lot of discrimination against blacks and then other minorities. But the history of the US, when you grow up there, I think you probably see the worst forms, police brutalities and those things. I remember when I was in US I used to get racially profiled a lot, but in Hungary I have not experienced such things. The police have never stopped me in the US. In fact, you almost, anytime you see a white car coming, you think it's the police and you can be stopped for no reason. It happened to me several times in the US. Here I haven't experienced that. Here the only thing is, I think sometimes when I'm interacting with people who are not so fluent in English, I think we're just not able to have a very smooth and probably deep conversation like we could. And for me, I don't see that as discrimination. I just see that as a language barrier. But on the contrary, I've also met people that were actually quite fascinated to interact with me. Some people in Hungary have told me I'm the first Black person that they have ever met. I remember sometimes when I used to go to the Marshtown market, some people, mainly women, like older women, they'll just come to me and then they'll be rubbing my skin.
As if it was different.
Yeah, they rub my skin. I remember I had this interesting experience on the bus 73 where I was sitting beside a man, and then he was rubbing his hand in my hair and my skin, and he was just so excited, and there's been times where when I'm walking within the streets, some people come up to me and they ask if they can take a picture with me. And yeah, so I think it's been mostly positive experiences. And there might have been one or two incidents, mainly probably at shops or places like that. But I take that as just an issue of the customer service level of the people, and not necessarily discrimination that I have really experienced. Yeah.
And it's great to hear that you didn't have to face these kind of things.
Yeah, even if I face it, like I'm saying, for me, I didn't see it that way,
Right. Okay, moving on to talking a bit about NGOs. From your perspective, what are the main challenges that sub-Saharan African countries are facing in terms of development? And do you think that the NGOs can effectively address these challenges?
Okay, I'll answer this one from this angle. In Ghana, as you might know, of course, the whole African continent, with the exception of a few countries like Ethiopia, was colonized through the Scramble for Africa, the Berlin Conference of 1884, and so many of these countries have the colonial legacy, and then as a result of that, several structures within the countries are kind of broken down. And for example, yesterday, the 6th of March, was the Independence Day of Ghana. Ghana has been independent for 67 years now. And, a lot of the legacies from colonialism still exist. And what happened is that during the time when Ghana was gaining independence, there was also this kind of Cold War era where, the US and Russia were also kind of fighting for power over the world. And so it kind of affected our development to the extent that I remember our president was trying to stay neutral. He didn't want to get involved, but then there was a coup d'etat which was supported by the US government, the CIA, and others. It was documented in some of the declassified CIA files. And so as a result of that, there were several military interventions. And in Ghana, the last military intervention was, I think, 1979, or let's say from 1981. Okay, this one I stand to be corrected, but let's say by the early 80s, that's when we had the end of our military rule. And so from that period, what happened was that the country, at a point, Ghana's economy was actually pretty well. When we gained independence, we're having the same GDP per capita to South Korea and some of the other East Asian countries that eventually became high-income countries. But for us, by 1981-82, the economy was very bad. And so we went through these structural adjustment programs with the IMF and World Bank and some of those things. So what happened was that through that period, that's when the NGOs began to evolve. From the 80s, mainly the NGOs emerged, kind of to complement the efforts of the government, because it was realized that the government alone could not provide the various social services in the areas of health, education, for the citizens. So the NGOs actually came to supplement those efforts. And mainly the NGOs are focusing in areas such as maybe human rights, of course, promoting education, clean water and sanitation, good health, and those kind of areas. And to a large extent, they've been able to help in those areas which there's been challenges. I mean, they contributed towards the MDGs, and also now contributing towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And they've made some progress, but what we realize is that the government sector alone cannot solve all the challenges, and the NGOs also alone cannot solve all the challenges. So it requires collaboration, even with the private sector as well. So so that's basically how it is. And the NGOs mainly, they are in the community, so they're able to interact with the communities and know what the communities need. But one thing is that they don't usually have the funding to undertake the project. So that is where the international development cooperation also comes in. And in recent times, the donors prefer to actually work directly with the NGOs instead of the government. And for now, in as much as the aid alone is not enough to solve all the problems, it still plays an important role in the development of Ghana and then other African countries.
Actually, talking about development and aiding, what do you envision the future of aid and development in sub-Saharan African countries?
It's very interesting because I think when the last government took power in Ghana, they had this vision of a Ghana beyond aid. And basically, I think the whole idea was that eventually, Ghana and then other African countries and even other developing countries, whether in Southeast Asia or Latin America, should move beyond the stage where they have to be dependent on foreign aid. And I remember when I was doing my PhD, I had an interview with the head of the Development Cooperation unit at the OECD, and he also was of the view that, and I share a similar view, that the aid that countries are receiving, whether aid for trade or aid for innovation, the whole vision should be that they'll be able to use these to supplement their development efforts, so that in the future they wouldn't have to rely on these types of aid. Of course, as we know, when we speak of aid too, it's not just about the financial support, but sometimes there's humanitarian aid, and then even technological assistance or technical support. So for me, I wish that in the future, the aid also would move beyond just the grants and the loans, but probably sharing of technological know-how and other strategies on how we could collectively tackle some of these challenges, because the challenges that such as poverty and inequality, and those things are also global issues which requires that all of us collaborate. So if you could collaborate also in terms of technology and expertise and some of those things, I think maybe it can help to make our world a better place.
How do you think that individuals and organizations can contribute to more impactful and sustainable initiatives?
Okay, so basically, you know that in order to solve various global challenges and global issues, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals has spoken in the Goal 17. It speaks about the fact that we need multi-stakeholder partnerships. So already that alone tells us that we cannot solve these problems alone. So of course, individuals make up communities, and then communities also make up countries, nations, and then, you know, all the way up. So obviously there's a responsibility from every single individual. And that is why issues like global citizenship, education is important, because individuals should also be aware of their roles, you know, in the SDGs. If you go to the SDG 4 and then even in SDG 12, it speaks about the need for global citizenship education, because that is how people become aware of the global issues and then the role that they play in it. And, you know, we're all interconnected in one way. You know, one person's action can actually trigger, you know, a sequence of events which can impact a nation and then, you know, also impact other nations as well, because in this globalized world that we are, you know, we're all interconnected and all. And so, yes, every individual has a role to play in several ways, depending on the issue that we are talking about. If it's about protecting the environment, every individual has a role by way of not contaminating the environment in their own way, if that's what we are talking about. If it's about pollution, the same thing. You know, individuals can also adopt lifestyles that can contribute to reducing, you know, the environmental impacts. I mean, so if it's about solving other issues, we can volunteer, we can donate our time, our resources. There's so many things that individuals can do, you know, volunteering in your communities. I think it's countless. And then, of course, with organizations, you know, as the SDG 17 indicates, we need both organizations in the private as well as the public sector. You know, corporate organizations can contribute in so many ways to sustainability. Though those who pollute, they can reduce their pollution. Aside from that, they can also undertake corporate social responsibility projects, you know, to help tackle some of the problems that may be existing in the community. So, as you know, sustainable development has the economic, the social, and then the environmental aspects. So, for the social and economic aspects, of course, organizations provide jobs, and they produce things. And so, of course, they have a role to play in that regard. And, of course, in the government sector too, you know, governments provide policies and regulations to ensure that different players or actors in the society can also function well, the individuals, the businesses, and all of those. So they also need to play their role as well. So I think in order to solve any issue, we should have collaboration from the various stakeholders from all sectors. Yeah.
As a closing question, I would like to ask you, what have been some of the most rewarding moments in your career working with NGOs?
I mean, working with NGOs is actually very rewarding from so many different aspects, because I remember we used to go to some deprived communities, and you know, sometimes the fact that you even have stakeholders discussions with people to take their input on developmental projects makes them even feel, it makes them happy that they can even contribute, just even their voice alone. Of course, sometimes we used to also donate certain products, and that one too, you know, when people are deprived and you give them certain things, they really feel a sense of gratitude. And then for some people too, I remember we used to have some projects where we also used to give people entrepreneurial skills so that they can set up their own businesses. And for that one too, people used to be able to transform people's lives. So the NGO sector, I mean, it's so rewarding. Even the government, you know, sometimes when they want to undertake projects and the civil society organizations take part in it, it also gives them other perspectives that otherwise they would have missed out, because sometimes they're not on the ground with the people. So even governments, even though sometimes the governments don't like the civil society organization because we're trying to hold them accountable and keep them on their toes, but sometimes they also appreciate the insights and then the expertise that NGOs also bring to them. And of course, for the donors, for example, I know the EU has a lot of projects in Ghana and Africa and in other developing countries. So for the donors too, a lot of times the NGOs are the vehicles or the channels through which they can also intervene in some of the global challenges that they want to help to solve. So the NGO is also a very important partner for the international development organizations and donor agencies, because sometimes they connect the finance and then other support to the beneficiaries who may need it. So I think NGOs are very much needed and appreciated by so many people in the society. Yeah, and I think they should be encouraged to do the work that they do. More or less, NGOs also are kind of like the moral compass of the society, because when no one is willing to speak out, you have movements, different civil society organizations which rise up to try to ensure that the human rights of citizens are upheld. Yeah.
How can you motivate NGOs to do more what they are doing right now?
For NGOs, most of them, NGOs are not-for-profit organizations. So most of them non-governmental organizations, and most of them don't have some core funding which they can always rely on. And so for some NGOs, unless they get support from donors, they cannot undertake any project. So probably if you ask them, most of them, their number one source of motivation would be to get funding. But then I think aside from that, sometimes they also just need support from the government, because I learned from interacting with some people in Hungary that the environment in Hungary is not very conducive for NGOs. The government doesn't really allow the NGOs to freely operate. That's what I learned. So in that case, the government could motivate the NGOs by allowing them to operate, because most of the time the NGOs are just trying to supplement the government in their efforts. I remember during the COVID, I know there are some NGOs that were helping to provide food to some people, free food to some people in Budapest. They were giving out other supplies and stuff. So I think that what the government can do is not to see them as an enemy, but rather to see them as a partner in development, and then encourage them in any way that they could, so that they could operate.
Thank you very much, Yaw.
Thank you for having me.
Dear listeners, we have come to the end of this episode. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us and for being part of our growing community. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes coming your way. Thank you again, and we'll catch you on the next episode.